After watching countless videos from its advocates, I'm convinced that the movement is largely made up of people who are having a reaction to something that all of us have experienced in life. And that's feeling condemned and rejected for who we are and wanting to be loved and accepted for who we are, even though this has come out in some seemingly bizarre ways.
Actually, I do want to be fat because bellies are beautiful.
You see, for those in the fat positivity movement, like all of us, there's a deep need for their personal identities to be accepted and validated. In our culture today, the label fat is typically seen as a bad thing that's undesirable. And so if we've inherited the belief that fat is who we are, then a lot of the time we're concluding that we're bad and undesirable. This, of course, can be incredibly damaging and harmful to someone's sense of self, and that's what a lot of those in the fat positivity movement are trying to fight against. They want to feel better about who they are, and they also want to help others who are in a similar position to feel better about themselves as well. So the natural solution to try to combat these negative feelings of rejection around your weight is to find a greater love and acceptance for your weight. And there's only two ways to do this, and both of which we see dominating the movement, but they're both ultimately failing the people in the movement. The first way to do this is to seek that love and acceptance for your weight from yourself. You affirm yourself by talking about how beautiful you believe that your fat is and how valuable you are because of your fat. This is why I believe they've made so many videos like this.
I look phenomenal.
I do want to be fat because bellies are beautiful.
Do you want to see a real body? Still beautiful, still worthy.
When they talk about how much they love being fat, what it seems to me that they're usually saying is that they've learned to radically love and accept themselves for who they are. If your identity is tied to your weight, then loving your weight means loving yourself. This sort of positive self-approval and affirmation just might work. The only catch here is that in order for it to be effective, you have to truly not care what anyone else says about your weight and sincerely believe that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about your weight. You have to be 100% self-assured that the only thing that matters is that you love yourself for your weight. But of course, not only is it really difficult to truly not care what anyone else thinks, I would argue that it's actually impossible for most of us. We all have a deep need to have our identity validated by other people, which is also true for the advocates of the fat positivity movement. This is evidenced by the fact that so many of them say that they don't really care what other people think, while at the same time posting about it on their social media pages, constantly telling skinny people that they need to validate overweight people for their weight. In reality, what happens when we say that we don't care what other people think is that we're really just seeking acceptance and approval from a group of people who we know will applaud us for saying that, and that's why we post it on social media for them to see. So all of us want to be loved and accepted by others for who we are, and that leads to the other option. The other option turns out to be the only real option that works in practice and not just theory. And that's for us to have other people validate our identity so that way we could feel loved and accepted for who we are. But the potential flaw in this approach can also be seen by the actions of those in the movement. When your identity depends on others, in order for you not to be crushed by what they say, you either have to control them and their opinion of you, or you have to let their opinion of you control you and hope that it's a good one. When it comes to controlling others and their opinion of you, this helps us understand why we see so many of them claiming that you have to date them and find them attractive, and if not, then you'll be labeled as fatphobic.
Because when people try to tell me a valid excuse, like, oh, I'm just not attracted to that, that's bigotry. There is no valid excuse for being fatphobic.
And if I'm not attractive, it's because, well, she's just a cute friend or whatever. That's all she could be. Because look at her, she's bigger. If you do not find people attractive and it's a preference, it's not a preference, it's actually bigotry.
But there's a handful of comments of people going, it's just a preference, stop playing a victim. I'm not playing a victim whenever I'm quite literally calling out the fact that you are fatphobic.
Having a preference is something like, I'm looking for a partner who likes kayaking, or wakes up early in the morning, or loves pizza. But when your preferences exclude an entire group of marginalized people, that's problematic. Okay, that's not nice. That's not a preference. If you lump all fat people in one group together as though they are not very different individuals, That's fat phobic.
When they talk about how fat phobic it is not to want to date overweight people, we have to remember that their weight is tied to their sense of identity. So it seems to me what they're usually saying is that it's wrong for you to reject someone for who they are and their true identity. Therefore, by rejecting them because of their weight, that means you're rejecting them for who they are at core, and that makes sense as to why it means so much to them. But the issue with this approach might seem a little bit more obvious. What happens if people still don't want to date you and they still find your body unattractive? What happens if they don't share your views of your weight and they don't see it as a good thing? If this happens, then you won't feel loved and accepted for who you are, and once again, you'll feel crushed and you'll feel worthless and rejected. So now the full scope of the problem with the movement is becoming more clear. They're either telling people that the only opinion of your identity that matters is your own, which isn't possible for most of us, or they encourage you to try to control other people's opinion about your identity, which also doesn't work. So the only real option that's actually possible is to let someone else's opinion of your identity control you. But people change and they can let you down and they can be unpredictable. And so if your need to be loved and accepted depends on their opinions of your identity, then your identity will ultimately be in a fragile state. So then what is the solution? Well, to understand the right solution, you first need to understand the right problem. And it seems to me that the reason why the movement won't work is because it's trying to solve the wrong issue. The problem is not so much people being rejected by others because of their weight, although of course that is a real issue, nearly as much as it is in the fact that the advocates have come to believe the initial lie that their identity is somehow tied to their weight. I think that's wrong. In my view, you are not your weight, and you're far, far more than a number on a scale. You're not any more or less you because of how much you weigh. And really, when you think about it, if we have to have our identities validated by someone other than ourselves, then wouldn't the best option be for us to let it be from someone whose opinion of us would never change? Someone who's proved with their life that they'll never condemn or reject us and will eternally love and accept us for who we truly are. Someone who won't disappear on us and someone who won't die. For those of us that are Christians, we can take comfort in the life that Christ lived. He was condemned, so that way you could be assured that you won't ever be condemned. He was rejected, so that way you could be eternally accepted. If you believe this, then you can know that his opinion of you, which will never change, will give you the freedom to lose weight and be healthier without feeling like you're selling out your identity or turning your back on who you really are. You can be free from the negative opinions people have about your weight because you know that you're not your weight. Now you're free to make decisions about your weight and from the perspective of what's best for you and others, knowing that your identity doesn't depend on it. But this doesn't just apply to those who are part of this movement. The reality is all of us struggle with this, just in different ways. I talk about my own struggles in this area in this video, so go ahead and click here to see what I mean, and then you can let me know, what do you mean?